Hello everybody, my name is James Wong and welcome to my Music 420 Capstone Project presentation. The topic for my capstone project of 2022 is Audio Visualizer with VFX Particle Systems. Before we get into the project, just a little bit more about myself. I'm currently in my final year of study at UBC. I'm in the Faculty of Arts. My major is Asian Area Studies, and I have been pursuing the Applied Music Technology minor for the past few years. This entire process has been very rewarding, yet as of making of this video, I'm not entirely certain on my career path post-graduation, but what I can say for sure is I'll do my best to utilize my takeaways through the AMT program. So as an introduction to the project that I'm working on, please take a look at what I have on screen right now. These definitely seem very nostalgic, and it is very accurate representation of how I feel when I see these images. I remember fondly when I was a kid on my old family PC that whenever I listened to music, track by track, back in the day when we had to download them, what accompanied the soundtrack, especially in Windows Media Player at the time, were these floating bars or very abstract visuals that sometimes followed what is being played, but more or less was just plain visuals that didn't carry that much information. I remember as a kid thinking what those bars or little patterns meant, and I've always enjoyed exploring the certain correlation between what is being played and what is being seen. Well, nearly 2 decades later, the way people listen to music nowadays definitely has changed drastically compared to back then. I assume many of you are very familiar with what's on the screen right now, Lo-Fi Girl and lots of background music. Many of us like to have it on in the background while we're doing daily tasks or studying. The illustrations and visuals that tend to accompany the music definitely has gotten a lot better over the years. They become more aesthetically pleasing, more sophisticated, better drawn, and just prettier in general. But I never forgot those floating bars I saw when I was a kid. Sometimes I thought to myself, it is nice to have pretty illustrations to go with background music and all, but is this floating bar in the background still the best we can do in terms of letting the audio render itself? Because even nowadays, as you can see in the picture on the left, the floating bar is still incorporated into a lot of background music videos. And simple forms of audio visualization is like the image on the right with a red square that only pulsates to the beat of the music. And I thought that we could probably do a lot better than that. Obviously, it is impossible to simply convert any sound or audio into visuals on its own, but that does leave us a lot of room for subjective exploration. We have the ability to process audio, so any sound can be converted into audio signals, and thus we can take the parameters such as pitch and amplitude and convert them into data, and then apply them onto a set of predetermined guidelines for conversion to visuals. These guidelines can be set however we'd like, as long as they remain consistent throughout one piece of music, and there will be also a certain degree of randomness applied to the conversion. So what you see here is a basic layout of the project. From the left, you can see that there are audio inputs. For the purpose of this demonstration, I have 5 inputs, but you can realistically have as many as you'd like, and each input represents a voice, quote-unquote, or an instrument in most cases. These audio inputs get sent into an MSP Max Patch, and then output it into a Unity world with the same number of particle generators as there are inputs. Initially, when I submitted the proposal, I also planned to have an external motion tracking device that would apply effects onto the audio in real time, as well as modifies the parameters that are being sent to the Unity World particle generators. But in the end, I decided against that, but the functionality of being able to process the audio will be a useful add-on if it comes to it. That additional functionality was left out because I thought for the purpose of demonstrating the concept of this project, the contents of the Max Patch was already sufficient. So that just about explains the rationale and the layout. It is a visualizer that is adapted to any or most inputs. It is adjustable and is most importantly interesting than just floating bars and abstract art and accompanying illustrations. So before we dive into the intricacies of the conversion process that I have chosen, as well as some of the difficulties that I have encountered, I want to give everyone our first demo. It is a piece from the famous game Animal Crossing by Nintendo, and I hope at least one of you will recognize it. So from that brief clip, you probably noticed a few things. First, that the number of instruments matches the number of particle systems on the screen, and each instrument seemed to have a pattern that reflects how the instrument was being played at the time. For the purpose of this demo, I've chosen a very contrasting selection of colors for the particle generators. However, as you can see here, in the gradient editor, we are free to choose whichever color selection that we like that would adhere to the theme of the piece being played. Now let's take a closer look at the VFX particle generators. I've chosen to use VFX over the Shuriken particles in Unity, as they rely more on the GPU, and I feel like they look more aesthetically pleasing. So if you look in the particle system editor over here, we can see that every VFX particle system has initialization, which sets the position and the shape, as well as intensity, the gradient, as well as the trail bodies. For the purpose of this project, I've set three what's called exposed variables that I will control using data that I've sent over from Max MSP. Now, when we look at the Max MSP side of things, we can see that these track modules correlate to each of the particle generators, in which they send pitch tracking information, amplitude tracking information, and spawn rate, which is this right bar over here. So there's a little bit of randomness to how the particle moves. You can see that right now because there's nothing being played. They're only moving very slowly, but once it tracks the amplitude of the audio input, it will move a lot more. Remember those exposed variables in the VFX particle system in Unity? These pitch, amplitude, and spawn rate information will be mapped to these exposed variables in Unity. Right now I have pitch to color and amplitude to intensity, but realistically you can use any parameter you want. So now I will play one single instrument separately so it's easier to see the correlation. Here we go. I don't know if you noticed, but the color shifts according to the pitch, and the way it moves, the speed at it moves, has to do with how loud the track is. Originally, I had the idea of running spectral analysis through all the audio signals using this Max MSP patch called Yana. I wanted to be able to differentiate between instruments, say as a guitar or a piano, but I soon encountered a major problem was that I wanted to use the partials of the incoming audio signals. What I quickly found is it gives you so much data without that much difference in, let's say there are 50 bins or partials and there are only a little bit of data in like 5 or 6 of them, and then the rest is very insignificant. So I wasn't able to implement that, but I do think the most significant improvement that could be made to this capstone in the future would be a more feasible way to take timbre into consideration. Another significant problem was the range of the pitch or notes being played. As you can see here, I have to manually input the range of the notes so that the color scaling would be more noticeable. Right now, I still have to basically listen to the track manually beforehand and then manually input the range that the instrument plays. So ideally, something like this will be able to automatically process beforehand the input signal and generate the range of inputs automatically. Same goes with different tracks having varying levels of input gain. Some are a lot louder and some are a lot quieter. That's why I have the scale object exposed here, so I can manually change it to become more or less sensitive depending on the loudness of the track. Again, something that can hopefully be done in processing beforehand. So now you might be wondering, what about percussion, tracks that don't have a clear pitch? I also thought of that, and that is what the 5th track is for, as you can see here. And it has a special particle generator in Unity. The way I approached percussion tracks is I wanted to be able to differentiate between the kicks and the hi-hats, or boots from the cats, so to speak. So I have a frequency split of 500, as you can see here, and whatever lower goes into this meter and whatever higher goes into this meter. And I have them, at least for this patch, the lower controlling the radius of a ring, and the higher controlling the color shifts. So if I just demo a percussion track in Unity, it would kind of look like this. I think it works pretty well at separating the frequencies. It doesn't have to be 500 Hertz, it could be anything that's necessary for the given piece. As you can see, the lower frequencies are making the ring pulsate, and the higher frequency, the hi-hats, whenever active, they are making the color shift. Once again, it doesn't have to be in blue and red. I just chose these colors for the purpose of contrast. Also, I almost forgot, some basic programming in C# was involved. Extra thanks to Dr. Keith Hamill for helping me write the script because I'm a terrible programmer. We have scripts responsible for changing the radius, the color, the particle position, and the intensity and the spawn rate, so on. So that about covers most of the aspects of the Capstone project. Definitely there are lots of limitations so far in its current form, and a lot of possible improvements could be made. There are a lot of possible add-ons that could be potentially implemented. I think one of the first things I would do is implement live input feed from microphones. As I mentioned, spectral centroid is something that could be used to track timbre, and ideally it would not have to manually input as many parameters as I am doing now, as well as applying audio effects either through motion tracking or other means. These are things I will definitely try to work on in the future. Special thanks to Dr. Bob Pritchard and Dr. Keith Hamill, especially, for being my supervisor for this Capstone project. I hope you found all of this interesting, and I hope sometime in the future, background music can be also accompanied with generative graphics. To end off, I will just show a brief demo of one of my own pieces that I have put into this visualizer, and hope you enjoy. Thanks for watching.